I have to free up space. Hey, good morning. Welcome to our continuing series on the divine feminine. And it's so exciting to have this series to talk about different feminine women who throughout history were parts of religion, were parts of lore, were parts of different pantheons. And today, I think it's really appropriate, love, and the month of Valentine's and a lot of focus on the subject of love, to talk about Kuan Yin. And Kuan Yin is from Buddhism, and both in Chinese, in Korean, in Japanese, in Vietnamese, in all of these different areas of Asia. And she's this beautiful Buddha of compassion who has such an interesting story. And there's lore around her story, and there's some factual things about her story, and it kind of all blends together. And Kuan Yin, and I'll show you this picture. This is a book called Becoming Kuan Yin
That was on my list.
that's on your list.
Yes.
Becoming Kuan Yin. And she like became this beautiful Buddha of compassion. And her life was difficult. And one of the folklore stories behind her story is that her father was dying, and she said, I will give up my arms, my eyes, just to have him live. And then she had thousands of arms and thousands of eyes to see all and to have compassion for all in the world. And I think um, there's so much to be said for this story of compassion. And I think compassion is something that starts to lack in society at times. And when we lack compassion for others, it is it's just not a society I want to live in, right? Because we are all human beings. We should have care and concern and compassion for all people, whether they look like us, talk like us, pray like us, celebrate like us, eat like us, whatever that may be. And in a time when the world becomes very divisive, and really, by saying it's this group or these people for you, that they're the cause of your problems, and creating division, she is really this Buddha of all encompassing, all compassion, and very much a mother-like figure. She also gets compared to Mother Mary. And before I get too deep into it, I'm going to let Cassandra say what she may or may not know about Kuan Yin.
Well, I love the research. I mean, the my tagline is that I'm just a seeker of knowledge and a spreader of the same. So for me, diving into the academic history of Kuan Yin, diving into first the Indian tradition of Buddhism. So it comes from the Theravada, which focuses on the Pali Canon and the monastic practice. And so there she was actually a male. And it
She
was
did.
so she came from this tradition in India. And I've practiced saying it out loud, but there's a very real chance that I might not say it correctly. But her, oh gosh, how do we say it again? It's Avalokitesvara. And you can
What's her
correct
male
me,
name? Yeah.
was her male name. So that he was also the bodhisattva of compassion there too. So it was a lesser Buddha, which is kind of what translates into the Chinese, Korean, Japanese traditions as well, going into this kind of lesser Buddha, simply because some of the traditions basically said that when she reached that enlightenment point, when she got there, she said, no, there's still too much suffering left. So she made this vow to stay in this lesser deity sort of realm in order to go back to earth to heal all of the suffering. So what I learned about her was just phenomenal. And it also kind of, since we've kind of come off of the biblical traditions in some of our previous divine feminine um, meetings and our discussions, it kind of aligned with Jesus for me. with
Mm,
how the stories that I read of her came, she was on earth for thousands of years, treating compassion, treating things with compassion, treating suffering with compassion. And then she went into hell to do the same. And then she went into the heavens to do the same. And of course, one of the stories was, well, why do angelic and heavenly deities need her form of compassion? And the idea was that they also struggle with change. So in this Buddhist tradition, deities were struggling too, and they needed Kuan Yin to help with their suffering, to help with battling with change and what's coming up. So in my mind, it kind of coincided with our own story of how Jesus went into hell to bring up these souls, and
mm,
how he's still, traveling the earth to spread compassion too. So I thought it was really interesting that we moved from our Christian Bible into Eastern Buddhism and still
right.
found similar themes and similar
The
stories.
themes, like, right, the themes play out in every different pantheon religious belief system, right? There's always somebody who is going to come in and be the person who is going to lead with compassion, who's going to lead with love. Another really strong comparison is to Mother Mary, and
Mm-hmm.
things that are, when I think about people invoking a god, goddess, Mother Mary, a saint, they invoke them for different things. And so I'm not Catholic, but isn't like Saint Christopher like protection when you
I believe
travel or
so.
something? And
That rings a
and
bell.
so so for her, she is invoked for protection, for fertility, for safe birth, for healing, for mercy, for emotional comfort, and for rescue from danger. And temples are dedicated for her to her all over the world, right? And in homes, small statues are often sitting on altars and people would burn incense. And she's not a god or a deity that is feared, right? And she is really like approached and she's approachable and she wants to approach people. Her image is very soft. She's often depicted in a white robe, sometimes holding a vase of pure water to wash away any suffering.
An
Sometimes she holds
elixir
a willow branch, symbolizing flexibility and resilience. There she is with that, with the
with the
water.
lotus.
Oh, with that, the
With She's
lotus. She
actually
has the
holding
lotus.
the lotus here, but
And
it's
so
that white robe that you were
the
referring
white,
to.
yeah. And so she's honored through chanting. There's chants that go with her, lighting incense, offering flowers, tea, and fruit. And there is a great compassion mantra that is recited when thinking of her. And she's also really thought of for acts of mercy in daily life. And so she is that representation of how I can show mercy to others. So for many, devotion to her is really less about doctrine and more about relationship. And to me, when you said, Jesus, and I was raised in the church, like he was more about relationship than
Mm-hmm.
doctrine, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
Paul shows up and becomes the person who's writing all this doctrine. And I'm like, dude, you weren't even hanging out with Jesus. Like, let's get on to this Jesus thing. Like, Jesus was like about the relationship. He didn't judge people, he hung out with people, and he wasn't about creating some dogma or any kind of doctrine to live by, right? It was just love. Like his message was purely love. And her message is also of love, right? Her love is not sentimental love. It's not passive. It's not indulgent. Her love says, I see you suffering. And this was her thing. She just did not want people to suffer. And she's like, I'm not going to turn away from it. How many times do people see somebody suffering and they turn away? They act like they don't see. They ignore the person in need. They just turn a blind eye to the person who's unhoused, to the person who's needing food, right? And I remember one time I pulled into In and Out and there was a gentleman who I presumed was unhoused, and he wasn't asking for money, wasn't asking for a handout, just was sitting. It was a warm day under the shade of a tree in the parking lot. And I said, "Hey, would you like to grab lunch with me?" And he said, "Oh, I'm not allowed to go in the restaurant." And I said, "But if you're a paying guest, you absolutely are allowed, and I'm paying for your meal. You're my guest. Let's go." So we went in and bought lunch and sat down and just chatted and talked. But I wondered how many people, and he wasn't even out there. He didn't have a sign. He wasn't asking for a handout. But I wondered how many people saw him and also, like me, took the presumption and kind of put together he looks like he's, unhoused and just ignored him. And so she is saying, I do not turn away. Your pain doesn't make you unworthy. There is nothing you could feel that would make me abandon you. Like, how beautiful does that feel that you have somebody who will never abandon you, even in your suffering? Her love is so unconditional. Again, we are taught of Jesus' unconditional love. And her message of compassion in her teachings, it's not pity, right? It's not fixing. It's not rescuing. It is deep listening. Like she wants to listen. She wants to hear. She wants to bear witness and not judge you. And she wants to act when action is needed. She's soft, but she's not weak, right? And she's strong, but she's not harsh. She's just like this really beautiful embodiment of I see you and I am here and you are not alone. And it just feels so welcoming and
Mm-hmm.
I just vibe with her. So,
You do.
yeah, my friend Michelle in Connecticut, who I met on TikTok, has a metaphysical shop and she sells crystals and she does sound healing and she has people who do Reiki in there. And when her shop was damaged in a roof collapse in a storm and water damage, she was cleaning out her shop and rescuing what they could. And she had this in one of her healing rooms. This is a statue of Kuan Yin, three-dimensional in this frame. And she mailed it to me and she said, "My guides clearly told me to send this to you, Debbie." And I was like, "Ugh." And I cannot tell you how much I I used to always say I'm a Christian Buddhist, is what I used to say. And now I can't even use the word Christian because it just sounds so yucky to me. And there's just this image, unfortunately, that some people have given a very bad name to that word Christian. And I don't subscribe to super indoctrination things like or a certain dogma to live by, but just like the basic message. Like I vibe with Jesus. I got an altar for him in my bedroom and I got all the Kuan Yin hanging out with me in here. And I just love her message of love and unconditional love. And so she she just comes to you and meets you exactly where you're at.
And to piggyback off of that, what the myths that I kind of dove in when I was researching her were just astonishing. But one of them that I loved so much was the idea that she appears in whatever form she needs to appear in to make sure that she gives you the message that she needs to give you. So it can be a male form, it can be a female form. I heard a story of the head of a dragon and the tail of a turtle. So there's so many different options. There were, I think one of the traditions talks about 33 specific manifestations of Kuan Yin, so that they each have their own different mantra that they recite in those particular temples so that they can call on her in her different forms. So it's like it doesn't matter what you need, she can show up in that form and be there for whatever is necessary. And going off of her starting story, the Mahayana school, which is where the Chinese Buddhism comes from, or it kind of adheres to, she when she was entering this bodhisattva school where she was kind of taking her vow as a bodhisattva, she took the vow to return lifetime after lifetime to alleviate suffering, which is all the vows that they all take. But her add on was that she was never to fall into despair. So when she was on earth for thousands of years and she was treating the suffering there, went into hell, treated the suffering there, went into heaven, treated the suffering there. When she was in heaven and she was about to ascend into her in her Buddha form and her into her higher form, her enlightened form, she looked back onto the earth and she saw that there was more suffering than when she left it the first time. There was more racism, there was more injustice. And she said, oh no, I have to go back. And she fell into despair. And the story that I had read and heard was that at that moment when she questioned things, her head exploded. And that was how she was cast from the heaven with her head exploded. And the Buddha came to her and he said, well, what's going on? And she said, well, I broke my vow. I fell into despair. And he's like, okay, well, let's figure this out together. So she and the teacher together formed these thousands of arms that you see in some of the pictures of Kuan Yin, each having an eye at the end of the arm, at the hand of the arm, and that was supposed to represent the thousands of different ways of seeing the truth and and of alleviating suffering. So with her teacher, with the Buddha, she came up with a way to still use this broken form of her own body to create something that was still going to help people. So it's like the message that I got from her right in that moment was it doesn't matter if you do reach despair. There's still a way to come back from it. The vow that she supposedly broke, and she was still able to form a new vow that was going to help the entire world with her thousands of arms and then her 12 heads that also were different ways of seeing the truth too. So it's like there's so many different ways to see how we can alleviate what we're going through, but also how we can help the people that are around us. So the her message just and the mythology behind her was just phenomenal to learn of. But that story alone, just her thousands of pieces of her head that turned into arms that then were used to help people in the future, like that resonated with me a lot because it's so different than what we see on an everyday basis. We see people kind of stuck in their own world and they're trying to figure out their own life, which is absolutely normal. But then we forget to do what you were talking about with your story, to extend compassion to somebody that might be needing it more than we could possibly imagine in our day-to-day lives. So it's just a little bit of a tidbit of Kuan Yin, but I use my goddess oracle deck often, and of course she popped into this goddess oracle deck when I needed her. And the poem that goes along with the Kuan Yin compassion says, "I made the vow and kept my word. I reached enlightenment, but rather than pass over to the state of eternal bliss, I retained human form till all beings attain enlightenment. Keeping human form enabled me to know more deeply the pain others experience because of my deep feelings, because of my understanding of misery and of suffering. Because of my decision, I am called the compassionate one, she whose name alleviates all suffering. But who but wouldn't you prefer to wait, feeling what others feel, suffering what others suffer, knowing their pain is your own? Wait till the end of all suffering and pain, till all beings attain enlightenment? For me, there was no other choice." So it was like there was no other choice but to be compassionate. And I love that reminder that there is no other choice but to be compassionate to ourselves and then to other people around us. And what a great day to do it on the day of after we're supposed to celebrate love. So we can celebrate love to ourselves and love to everyone around us. And using Kuan Yin, this amazing goddess figure, well, deity, well, I mean, lower deity, whatever we want to refer to her as. I mean, she's still a being that for thousands of years has affected people and the way that they manage their everyday lives. And I find that just so amazing.
I
I'm
love
on,
it.
I'll get off my pedestal now.
She's pretty cool. So in in thinking of all the ways that I appreciate and honor her and think of her and learn from her and try to emulate her and allow her to teach me, I wanted to come away today with what are some ways that we can apply her wisdom and compassion in our lives. And so, one for me that was really important is practicing radical listening.
Mm,
And for me, I used to talk and I would always be forming, Britt's like me too. Britt and I have had this conversation. I was forming my next answer. I wasn't listening to the person I'm having engaging in a conversation with. I was forming my next answer. So before reacting, before fixing, before advising, can I simply listen? Can I simply listen? A lot of times people just want you to listen, They really don't want you to fix. They really don't. They just want you, they're not asking you to come in and fix their lives. They just want you to listen and to witness them and just to tell their story and get it off their chest. Can I hold space without inserting myself? Now, when you've gone around being a life coach, there's an assumption that I'm going to come in and try to fix the situation. And that's not my job to do, right? So I have to really sit back and listen and ask, is this something that you just want me to listen? Do you need advice? Is there something more you want from me? But likewise, we need to listen to ourselves. And how many times do we abandon ourselves? And if she can hear all the cries of the world, can I hear the cry within myself? And how many
Mm.
times do we push through? Do we override when we're exhausted? When we really need a quiet moment, when we're overstimulated, when we are shaming our emotions, we abandon ourselves, right? And I had a huge workshop yesterday all about how shame gets in the way of our self-love. But how do we stop abandoning ourselves and honor our emotions and honor all that within us? And again, there's the cries of the world that she was listening to and attentive to, but I want you to be attentive to your own as well and really further that along. So ask yourself, what part of me may be suffering right now? And maybe you don't have any part of suffering. And maybe you have physical ailments that cause physical pain and suffering in your body. And maybe you have grief and emotional loss. And maybe some days it's great. And then there's a holiday, a birthday, a remembrance. Or you go somewhere that you enjoyed with that person who's no longer here, and you're missing them, and then you have heavy emotions and sadness for not being able to experience that with them in the physical now, right? And so think about how you operate those emotions, honor those emotions instead of escaping from those, right? Authenticity with self is work, right? Very much. It's work. So, how can I respond to myself and my needs? Compassion pauses. Compassion doesn't come super reactionary because a reaction is usually a judgment or it can just be an explosion of emotion. Reaction rushes in. Compassion pauses. And when we're triggered, we take a deep breath and we just kind of notice and we choose our response, whether to respond or not to respond. Sometimes no response is the best response. And the pause in all of that is sacred. And then offering micro acts of mercy. You don't need a
Mm.
thousand arms, right? You have two willing ones. Maybe you only have one. I don't know. Maybe you have a one good one. Man, I did some weeding in the yard. Both my shoulders were sore. And then I was helping a friend paint yesterday, and I was like, whoo, I use some muscles I don't normally use. But I want you to think of a kind word. How simple is a kind word, acknowledging somebody. I'm not saying, you know, go pick up every unhoused person in your town and take them out to lunch, but you could pack a lunch if you pass somebody every day and you see them and you could be like, "Hey, I made a lunch for you." How much would that mean to them? But that's a little bigger than a micro act of kindness. That's a really nice piece of kindness to feed them when they may not have food. But to actually look somebody in the eyes and say thank you just when you're passing on the street, when you're crossing through the store, which I don't go to the store often because I don't like peopling that much. I love people, but don't send me like I can't be in an aisle with three other people. Forget it. Like, no. And then flew and see, no, no, no. I got my girlfriend's car yesterday. We had gone into the store and I'm like, hand sanitizer. And she is a germ phobe like me. And she's like, I don't think I have any. I kept my hand closed that whole ride home till we got to her house. And I went into her house and went straight to the sink and washed my hands. It's not like I'm a weirdo for that. I just don't want to get sick. There's people who are gross out there. Okay. So a kind word, a kinder, softer tone. I am really bad about this sometimes. My tone sometimes is kind of harsh,
Same.
and it's especially harsh and very not compassionate sometimes to my mother, who can trigger the heck out of me. And I have worked on my tone with her, and it's going to be challenging in the next few months because she's in a different space and place because she's talking to a toxic family member again. But
Mm.
I've worked very hard on my tone with her because it's really hard when the person who embedded the buttons and the trauma and the triggers to undo that, right? Like I just jump back to like a 5-year-old version of me and I just so a slower tone, a softer tone, a boundary spoken gently. I mean, a boundary doesn't have to, I don't have to yell a boundary with somebody. You can say, that's actually a no for me, but thanks, right? Or sometimes
And
they can,
setting boundaries for self is self-love too sometimes.
yes,
Like that is
yes,
showing compassion for ourselves and love for ourselves in a way that no one else is going to because no one else can set those boundaries but us.
right.
So that's another way. I mean, yes, setting kind boundaries, but also even setting boundaries for ourselves when we wouldn't think of it.
Right. When we overextend ourselves, when we're the people
Hmm.
pleaser and we say yes to everything when we need rest. I've shared this a lot this last week. Last weekend, I was supposed to go with a bunch of girlfriends to go see a friend's daughter do a performance for her upcoming cheer thing that's in Florida this weekend. And I said, sorry guys, I'm exhausted. I'm not gonna be able to go tonight. And one of them had an announcement to make that her daughter's having a baby, so she FaceTime me at like 8 o'clock. I had to turn the light on. It was already dark. I was in bed in my pajamas, like, oh my God, did we wake you? And I'm like, no, I'm just kind of dozy. But I mean, I just was tired. But there's an old version of Debbie 20 years ago who would have been like, suck it up, Buttercup. You said you were going and you're going to disappoint them. And no, I'm
Mm.
sorry. I was tired and I honored that within me. Sometimes a simple text to somebody just to say hi, just to check in is such a beautiful act of kindness. And sometimes when you are feeling low, when you are feeling alone, when you are feeling exceptionally needing a friend, you can reach out and phone a friend. We don't want to be a bother. We don't want to bother anyone. But just phone a friend and be like, "Hey, I was kind of having a low day and I always enjoy your company and I just wanted to say hi, like how are you? What have you been up to?" And just have a conversation and interact with another human and just it can feel so good. Getting out in nature and going for a walk, whew, feels so good. So these little micro acts of mercy for yourself and others can be such beautiful things
Love
because
that. Yeah.
compassion is really embodied in those small daily gestures that we do for ourselves and others. Trying to stay soft without losing our strength. That's a tricky thing. And I I think for many of us, we feel that being soft, being kind, being compassionate, people are going to think, well, we're just going to walk all over them. They're a doormat. But guess what? You can be love and light and empathetic and kind and compassionate, but I'm not going to be a doormat. And I will quickly speak up for myself, and I will quickly hold a boundary, and I will quickly say no. So being compassionate doesn't mean you don't have self-respect and stand up for yourself, right? You have clear boundaries, you have self-respect, and honest and truth are spoken kindly. Like you think, is this because sometimes, people want to raise their voice and get really animated, and you don't need to get animated. You don't need to raise your voice. Sometimes the simplest things said in a soft whisper can really make a difference, right? So, what is the invitation from today in Kuan Yin? Kuan Yin's archetype is inviting us in today into this deeper question. What would it look like if I let myself have the same tenderness that I would kindly give to somebody else? What would that look like? And perhaps even more radical, what would it look like if I offered compassion without needing to be superior or right or needed?
Mm.
So many times we want to feel like we're better than somebody because we help them and look at me. And and we're prideful, or we feel like, oh, they need me, and that feels good. And that's not a really healthy way to work through compassion. So her legacy is not just in temples and in statues, and her legacy is like an embodiment of how to live. It's in every moment that we choose presence, and every moment that we choose non-judgment, and every moment that we really listen not to control and speak not to shame, but to be soft and non-judgmental, and listening and holding space and meeting people's needs and where they may want us to act, and where we would have a capability to act, to act. And if I don't have the capability to act and help them, to guide them in the direction of how they can get the help they seek, is kind of how I look at it, right? And I can't help every person in the world, but I can be the world to the one person I do help. And I've heard that said in different ways of saying that, right? And phrasing that. And so, again, what can one simple kindness be? And I can be the world to one person today. And maybe that one person needs to be me. Maybe it
Very
needs
true.
to be me. Quite often, it might be somebody else, right? So it's not about perfectionism. And even Kuan Yin said, "I'm never going to fall into despair," and she did. And then she came back even greater and better and able to help more people. And her whisper is really simple: compassion, lead with compassion, lead with kindness. And I love that very much. Any other
And I'm
any thoughts you wanted to add to that, Cassandra?
Well, I'm mostly curious because we keep instituting wisdom within this compassion theme that we've got going on. So the a lot of the statues of Kuan Yin have one hand up and the other usually has it's either down to represent compassion or it's got that water that you were talking, that vase of water, that vase of elixir that you're talking about. But that one hand up represents the wisdom that's
Mm-hmm.
needed in order to be compassionate and compassionate to us and to compassionate to others. So in the Buddhist tradition, that combination of wisdom and compassion is what leads to enlightenment. So it's almost like we're talking about one being that's helping us to marry wisdom and compassion together so that we can live not only our best lives, but we can help the people around us live their best lives. Because we're kind of piggybacking off what you were saying, we're someone different to every person in our lives, like who we are as a mother, who we are as a child, who we are as a friend. It's a different person to every single person that we meet. So I'm a huge fan of these mini micro acts of mercy that you were talking about. And I wrote it down so I can keep that one in my back pocket for the whole week to figure out as a person that's different in every aspect, then how can I bring compassion to that one little piece today? And how can I bring compassion to this one person today? And maybe that's me and maybe that's my friends and family and loved ones. So I'm just a huge fan of this Kuan Yin right now.
I love her. I love what Britt said. I'm going to work on my ability to use my divine listening and show compassion
Mm-hmm.
through creating space for others. I think that's a big one, a really big one. Um, I I just appreciate the space and place for us to talk and discover and discuss, how
Same.
we can come across these divine feminine archetypes, how they can apply and teach us lessons. And the last little bit I'm going to leave you with is my own Debbie Merced um, understanding of what wisdom is, because there's knowledge and there's wisdom. And here is my take on it. You can be very well learned, you can have degrees and PhDs, and you can be so smart. And that is, you may have all this knowledge you've taken in, but if none of this is applied to your life, then you can be a complete fool. And I have met a few fools in my day who just think they are the smartest thing ever, but act so foolish, who have no emotional IQ, who have no compassion, who behave really, wildly inappropriately to people. And there's no wisdom. If you take the things you learn and the experiences of your life as learning lessons, and you apply that to your life, the knowledge you received, knowledge is great, but until you apply it to your life, then you have no wisdom. Wisdom is applying the knowledge to your life. So I love that hand up is like the wisdom coming in, right? And yeah, wisdom and compassion paired together is really beautiful. But again, to me, you can be so smart, you can have all the knowledge in the world, but again, you don't apply it. You repeat the same behaviors over and over and over, and you're like, I learned this today, but if you never apply it to your life and you make the same mistake over and over, that's foolishness, right? Wisdom would say, I've tried it this way a few times, maybe it didn't work. Let's pivot and try something else. So that's my take on wisdom. I don't know, what Webster says on that, but that's Debbie Merced's definition of wisdom. Anybody have any questions or thoughts they want to share? Because we'd be open. No? Thank you guys for being here and sharing this space with us. I
Thank you so
really
much.
enjoy this so much. I don't know who we're going to do for March. Cassandra, you and I can chat this week and come up with the
Yes.
next divine goddess. I mean, maybe we should have you pull a random card right now out of your
Should we do it
deck.
right now?
Yeah,
I
pull
think
a
so.
random
I
card
was
out
just
of your
about to say,
deck.
let's find out who we're gonna
Yeah,
do. We're gonna who's gonna be the next one. Okay.
pull a random card. I love it because it's not going to be
Oh,
random.
Durga,
Oh, okay.
boundaries.
Okay. Yes, Durga, we're there. All right.
Durga for boundaries.
Yeah, I love this drum roll.
But also look at how fierce she looks
Yeah.
with her
She
weapons
might
and
not
her
be,
tiger.
yeah, she might not be the soft version. She might be like the
She,
collie version, right?
she's the warrior version
She's the
of
kick-ass take names version.
there we go.
There is a time to stand up.
And we have been covering compassion and love for a long for several of our discussions. So maybe it is time for us to switch it up a little bit and see the
To a little
fierce side
power
as
move.
well.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
I love it. Okay, so Durga will be March. I'll add
Durga will
that
be
to the
March.
calendar and we'll step into Durga next month. All right.
There we go.
So it'll be the same day, the 15th in March. We're going to do this again. I just love hanging out with you guys. If you've never done a Soul Fam Zoom, I do a Soul Fam Zoom once a month. That's also a great free event that we do together. And thank you all for being here. Thank you, Cassandra, for co-leading with me and bringing in, the wisdom that you share from what you studied of her. And thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful rest of your day, guys.
Thank you
Thank
both.
you.
So much
Thank
love for you
you.
guys. Mwah!
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.